My name is Deb Haliba, and I work at the University of Vermont Extension as eOrganic's Dairy Team Coordinator. eOrganic is an online community of more than 700 ag service providers and farmers who are providing science, experience, and regulation-based certified organic information on the web. Together, we publish articles, videos, and other content at eextension.org. This webinar is part of an ongoing series focused on certified organic dairy production systems. You can see more information about these webinars, find the recording of today's session, as well as a PDF of the PowerPoint today, and view other content on our website at www.eextension.org/organic_production. Before we get started, I wanted to give a quick rundown of today's webinar. Dr. Benbrook will give his presentation for about 45 minutes, and then we will ask you to respond to 2 quick poll questions that will appear on your screen. Next, we will hold a Q&A session with Dr. Benbrook for about 30 minutes. So if at any time you have a question, you can simply type it into the question box on your screen and hit return. If you can't see the question box, just click on the small plus sign next to the word question on your control panel to open it up. We will answer as many questions as we have time for. And finally, we ask that you respond to an email you will receive following the webinar to complete a follow-up survey. Okay, now I would like to introduce our speaker for today. Dr. Charles Benbrook is Chief Scientist at the Organic Center, a national nonprofit organization that provides peer-reviewed scientific studies on organic farming. For 18 years, Chuck worked in Washington, D.C. on agricultural policy, science, and regulatory issues, including Executive Director of the Board on Agriculture for the National Academy of Sciences, Executive Director of the Subcommittee of the House Committee on Agriculture during the Reagan administration, and Agricultural Staff Expert on the Council for Environmental Quality during the Carter administration. For 15 years, he ran Benbrook Consulting Services, where he conducted analyses on a number of agricultural science, technology, and public health and environmental issues. In 2006, he joined the Organic Center as the organization's chief scientist. Dr. Benbrook received his PhD in agricultural economics from the University of Wisconsin at Madison and an undergraduate degree from Harvard University. He holds an adjunct faculty position in the Crop and Soil Sciences Department at Washington State University. Chuck, thank you very much for joining us today.
Well, thank you for the invitation.
So you can go ahead and get started. Seem to have lost some audio from Dr. Benbrook.
No, I'm here.
Okay, great.
You're going to advance the slides?
You can go ahead and advance them.
Okay.
There you go.
Okay. Well, thank you for the opportunity to present this webinar on a new Excel-based calculator that the Organic Center has developed over the last couple years. Most of the sort of second round of development work on the Shades of Green calculator was supported by a grant the center received from the Packard Foundation. This work really began in response to a provocative paper that Dr. Jude Capper, who's actually an animal science professor here at WSU now, published in the summer of 2008 in the Proceedings of the National Academy of Sciences, which reached the conclusion that conventional dairy farms with cows treated by RBST had a lighter environmental footprint than organic dairy production. Many people that read this paper had questions about it. There was a good, healthy exchange among Dr. Capper and other people working on dairy systems and dairy modeling. And I and the center were asked to work on the development of a model to first replicate the results of Dr. Capper and try to understand what was behind them, but also to pursue a more detailed assessment of really what what the differences are in terms of the environmental footprint. So we started developing an Excel-based model. We call it Shades of Green. It does go quite a bit beyond the model that Dr. Capper and her team developed. The main innovation and the important changes in the analysis that we've done involve how animal health and longevity are taken into account in the context of environmental footprint of a dairy farm operation. All of the model itself, a 100-page user's manual that provides complete documentation and a report based on a first application of the Shades of Green calculator are freely available on the website of the Organic Center, and provide an opportunity for any farmer, researcher, person involved with the dairy industry to play around with the calculator and use it to model either an individual farm or a set of farms, or perhaps the impact of a technology or a management strategy. The actual calculator itself is available in 2 different versions through the Organic Center website. It's free. There are versions for Excel 2010, 2007, and 97, 2003. There's a clean version that is partially parameterized, but does not have any information specific to a given dairy farm. And then what we call the conventional and organic farm environmental footprints application, or the COEF application, is also available, and was the basis of the report that we've done. This is the, I'm going to go through a number of screenshots that are actually from the calculators. A few of them are a little hard to read because we tried to fit all 4 scenarios onto the screen, but my goal here is to introduce people to what's there, not to describe to you the full complexity of the model, because it would take much longer than our available time. But in the application setup page, the calculator is designed to project a number of performance outcomes from 4 different scenarios or dairy farm management systems at one time. By doing multiple applications of the calculator, it's certainly possible to go beyond the 4 scenarios. But in the application setup stage, you define what the 4 scenarios are. This is the cover of the user manual and documentation report. It's a very complete and thorough explanation of every equation embedded in the calculator, the source of all the data that's been used to parameterize it, and for those people that are going to take a run with the calculator, I strongly urge you to pay particular attention to this overview and introduction section in the user's manual. It comes on pages 3 through 19. As that's the section where the structure, the concept behind the structure of the calculator is described, as well as recommended strategies for the use of it. When, especially for the farmers on the line that haven't played around with a lot of these simulation models or calculators, it can seem at first a little bit daunting in using this, but I think if you read this introduction section, it'll give you a good sense of how to do it. And for the modelers and the technical folks out there, we're very proud to say that this is, to our knowledge, the first fully functional environmental footprint calculator where there's no dark corners in the black box. Every equation, the sources of all the equations, and all the input parameter values are fully described. We developed and applied the calculator initially to 4 dairy farms, 2 conventional farms, and 2 organic, and this report, which was released in November of 2010 by the Organic Center, A Dairy Farm's Footprint, introduces the calculator but mostly just references the user's manual and the calculator itself. But this short report, I think it's about 26 pages, presents the results of our first application. A group of people came together and have worked really over the last 2 years to first develop the calculator and then to co-author the report. I deeply appreciate the contributions that these folks have made, and without them, there was no way that the center could have developed a calculator of this sophistication. This is an evolving team, and we certainly are hoping that perhaps some of the individuals on the line today will consider helping the center develop some of the new applications and modules that the calculator needs to address more fully the full range of environmental and food quality and food safety impacts of dairy production. Towards the end, I'll share with you some of our plans for the next iterations of development, and we are actively looking for partners to take the calculator to the next level. The structure of the calculator itself, the initial page defines the application, and the user specifies the 4 scenarios that are going to be used. And then there's four tables that lay out the chosen parameters. And what this is it brings together in one place all the parameters and choices that have been made in terms of what equation to use to calculate a given environmental impact. It brings that all together in one place so that the user can make judgments about what to compare between the scenarios and what might account for differences in the results table. So we'll show a little bit later some examples of these chosen parameter tables. Those are followed by a set of results tables. All of the results appear in 4 different tables, and we've tried to express all of the results in about every unit and way that would conceivably be wanted, so that it's very easy to compare the results from our calculator to other models and life cycle assessments, because we report the results in just about every way anybody does, and this really makes it facilitates the comparison to other work. The functional and operational parts of the calculator, where input parameter values are introduced, where choices are made about which equations to use, and all the calculations are made, appear in steps 1 through 15. They're a series of interconnected Excel tables, and we'll go through them as well, or at least some of them. The Appendix A is a detailed summary of all of the formulas, all of the variable names, where they appear in the calculator, and the sources. And then there's also an appendix that provides detailed tables on various default values that are incorporated in different calculations. And for the most part, these default values come from either IPCC or EPA greenhouse gas inventory reports. The first step in the calculator establishes a herd profile. Like many analyses, this calculator was developed to project the environmental footprint of a year in the life of a lactating dairy cow. So most of the results are reported per year and reflect both the feed intakes and waste generated by the lactating cow, a portion of a dry cow required to keep the lactating animal in production for 365 days, as well as the replacement animals. You'll see in many places throughout the calculator there's these 2 buttons here, these radio buttons, and it's by clicking these buttons that you tell the calculator to either use a user-reported value, as in the case of 87.6% on this portion of a dry cow and lactating, the percent of the cow herd that's milking. But the calculator is also designed in many places to do an internally calculated value based on other parameters that have been introduced. And this is one of the powerful features of the calculator, in that you can actually have the calculator estimate things like calving interval based on other data, and it provides an interesting internal check on the records that dairy farmers have kept. In step 2, one of the key parameters is both the cull rates and the death and downer rates. And we provide a worksheet here where the user, if they have data from their own farm or from a set of farms on reasons for involuntary culling and reasons for voluntary culling, and then the same down here in terms of death and downer rates, the user can introduce those values. They're automatically added up, and then this number is going to be transferred, again, automatically into another step of the calculator where the total involuntary cull rate is an input value in subsequent calculations. In the lactation profile, this actually shows all 4 of the scenarios, which is what you see when you work through the calculator. Many of the screenshots that I'm going to show today in the presentation will only include 2 of the scenarios, and we've done that simply because it's hard to read and fit them in. But here in the lactation profile, it establishes the whether it's a first lactation heifer or a cow that's gone through multiple lactations, the milking frequency, the days in milk in which the rest of the analyses is based on, and milk quality is recorded in terms of fat and protein content, and of course you'll notice the substantial difference between these are relatively high production Holstein cows being given RBST on mostly a TMR with relatively lower fat and protein content compared to the grass-based Jersey farm producing only 50 pounds of milk. So these are the milk production level, which comes in here. The unadjusted milk production level is one of the critical input parameter values that any user has to establish, and of course these values drive many other aspects of the calculator. We also use the milk quality data on fat and protein to calculate what's called energy-corrected milk, which is the appropriate basis for comparing different dairy production systems, taking into account the changes in the nutritional quality of the milk, in particular between Holsteins and Jersey and Guernsey breeds. And so here in this step, the length of the lactation is internally calculated based on the standard definition and factors that drive the length of the lactation, but it could also be user reported. And so that's what goes on in step 3. The novel parts of the calculator and where we put a significant amount of our development time was in trying to deal with the substantial impact of animal health and longevity on the environmental footprint of dairy cows. So I'm going to go through some of the things that we've built into the calculator dealing with breeding performance, health, and longevity. And I am not aware of any other models that cover these factors in terms of the performance of lactating cows. We first get at reproductive performance, so we have to establish how old the heifers are at their first breeding attempt, the number of days from calving to a first breeding attempt, failure to breed rates, which are known to most dairy farm operations, and of course there's USDA survey data available on failure to breed rates. The average number of breeding attempts per conception carried to term is a critical parameter that drives the length of lactations and hence the calving interval. And the number of days between breeding attempts is another critical variable, especially on conventional farms that tend to experience a much more difficulty in getting cows to breed and hold a calf through the term. And so it's these parameters that get entered here that drive calculations of the average length of lactation and the calving interval. In this step of this part of step 4, we introduce the outcome of breeding attempts, and in this step it's conceptions going to full term, and we capture the percent of heifer calves, the percent of bull calves, and then the total number of calves that are born during a productive cow's life, which of course is based on the average number of calves that are born. In step 4.4, the critical calculations are made in terms of the age of the cow at the end of her productive life and the average number of lactations that are carried out. There's some input variables that go into this. For example, days in the lactation with diverted milk that comes up in these boxes, and we've in several places in the calculator we provide worksheets for farmers that do have or dairy processing companies or researchers that have access to some or all of the data required to come up with an estimate of the days with diverted milk. And obviously on a conventional farm treating mastitis with antibiotics and other diseases with drugs that have withholding times, that accounts for a certain number of days with diverted milk. And then on an organic farm where colostrum and milk is typically used to raise calves for the first 6 weeks, you have to take into account the days in diverted milk for that purpose. And by diverted, we mean diverted from going into the bulk tank and being sold as part of the total production of the cow. This worksheet B we've structured and provided to give farmers an empirical way to estimate the average number of lactations per cow. And so in scenario 1, for example, with 47% of the cows being first calf heifers, 35% going to 2 lactations, and 11, 5, 2 on through, this is a weighted average calculation that then is transferred into other the appropriate other cells in the calculator, or a user can just input the values. Total milk production for the cow is calculated in a very straightforward fashion. The milk production, both unadjusted and ECM milk per day, is entered in an earlier step. The average number of days in the lactation are determined in large part in light of the ease of rebreeding or difficulty in getting the cow rebred. And then in terms of the total production during a cow's life, it's simply the number of lactations, average number of lactations are multiplied by the total milk production in a single lactation. And then we express milk production both in terms of pounds per year and kilograms per year over the productive life of the cow, which is really probably the most unbiased metric for overall production. We built revenue into the model to provide farmers with at least the ability at a sort of a gross level to understand the difference between organic and conventional production, or whoever they're contracting to. So the user introduces their average price received per pound of milk, and of course for the organic dairy farms it's pretty easy because they tend to be milking under contract with a set price for a year. So the users can introduce these values and calculate both the gross revenue per day or per lactation or per cow or however one would like to do that. In terms of the meat production from the animal, we estimate the gross revenue from meat production also by capturing the value of the cow when she's retired and shipped to slaughter, as well as the value of the calves that the animal produced during her productive life. And users can either establish the price of the meat produced by a lactating cow by selling the calves right after weaning at a set price and entering that price, or projecting the total weight of meat produced and the income from that meat based on the price of meat that was gotten by an individual producer. In steps 6 through 8 in the calculator, these steps are very similar to other calculators. They use similar analytical models, for example, to estimate the total dry matter intake needed per day to support a given level of production. And based on the estimate of total dry matter intake for a Holstein cow milking at 75 pounds of unadjusted milk per day, it calculates the DMI needed, and then based on the rations that cow is being fed, we calculate the total feedstuffs required, taking into account storage and harvest losses, whether the cow is walking out to pasture or not, the condition of the cow, etc. And through these steps, we really get to the total feed inputs. At this time, the calculator is fully parameterized to include 11 feeds. There are 6 forages, 4 grains, and 2 protein supplements. And one of the areas of further work is to build additional feedstuffs into this. So the user can specify the percent of the dry matter intake for any one day that goes into these different forage-based feeds. Then the total for forages is added up here and on down the line. And for each scenario, we do the lactating cow, the dry cows, heifers older than a year, and heifers under a year. In steps 10 and 11, the amount of acreage needed to produce the feedstuffs to support one lactating cow for a year and her what we call sort of supporting animal population are calculated. We have a estimate in there of the percent of land producing each of the feedstuffs that's generally grown on Class 1 prime row crop land versus other classes of crop land. And then in step 11, the synthetic chemical inputs that are used in conventional feed production are also calculated based on national average input rates for the crops that are embedded in the feed formulation. The calculator is designed so that an individual farmer who has much more precise data about their exact crop yields, their input use, can use that data to make these calculations. So there's really actually quite a sophisticated cropping and feed set of steps in this calculator for farmers that have that data. In steps 12 and 13, the feed intakes are converted into estimates of crude protein, phosphorus, potassium, and other standard measures of nutrient intakes based on the rations that are being fed to the cow and the overall dry matter intake required to support that cow for a day. In step 13, the data from previous steps, and in particular step 12, are used to calculate total manure and nutrient excretions, again using sort of standard, typically EPA, but sometimes IPCC equations to make these estimates. And in many cases, we provide the user an opportunity to pick among different equations that are used in the literature, and also the ability to override any of these values and put their own calculated values in if they have them. In step 14, we begin the calculations of greenhouse gas emissions. The calculator in its current form projects both enteric and manure-based methane, but we have not completed a nitrous oxide or a CO2 module, and certainly are looking forward to that so we can then calculate the total global warming potential of dairy management systems. But clearly I think most of the focus tends to be on methane in comparing the environmental footprint of dairy farms. So the way that we deal with methane on the manure side is these are the standard manure management system options that are covered both by IPCC and the EPA in its inventory of greenhouse gases technical report. And the EPA reports a methane conversion factor for each of these manure management options, the wet systems, anaerobic lagoons, and liquid slurry-based systems, as well as the dry systems. Now, one of these numbers that appear here are, we actually have in the default assumptions the opportunity for the user to specify the region of their country that they're working in or want to model, because as those of you that have done work on modeling methane from manure, where you are in the country and the climate affects these methane conversion factors. But what the user of the calculator has to do is make an estimate of, over a 12-month period, the percent of manure that is managed through these different systems, and they enter these percents here, and then a simple weighted average formula is used with the applicable methane conversion factor to come up with a manure management system methane conversion factor. So that's what this number is right here. It's in effect a best estimate of the annual average methane output based on how the manure is managed. And as you'll see when we start talking about some of the results in just a minute, the differences between a conventional confinement operation where most of the manure is managed using a wet system and a grass-based Jersey farm, whether it's organic or not, is very substantial, and is in fact probably from a greenhouse gas point of view the most significant difference. This step goes on to make a number of other calculations of net energy use. For example, gross energy intake, and this volatile solids produced is a input value in one of the EPA recommended methods for calculating enteric methane emissions. So we calculate that value at this stage using the EPA's recommended equation. In step 15, we calculate the enteric and total methane emissions from one lactating cow, and we provide a number of different ways to do this, because there certainly is no strong consensus on the best way to calculate enteric methane. If the user has measured it or has used some value, the user can report it, and they would click this radio button, and then all the subsequent calculations and all the results in the results tables, of course, would be driven off of that user-reported number. Alternatively, there's a calculation for enteric methane that's based on milk production, on dry matter intake, on percent of forage, and then there's an EPA recommended or preferred method. And for purposes of this first application, that is the one that we've used, as shown by, we've clicked that radio button. This carries over in this box the manure methane, again expressed either as pounds per day or kilograms per day, and then this last value is simply the sum of the enteric and manure-based methane for one lactating cow expressed on a per-day basis. This is an important slide in that it really highlights for this current application, the COEF application, some of the critical input parameter values and then performance indicators. As I said before, we've 75 pounds of milk on the high production confinement Holstein dairy with cows treated with RBST, 60 pounds on a Holstein farm, a high production Holstein farm under organic management with I think there's 10 or 12 pounds of grain assumed in the ration, but 30% of DMI from pasture during the grazing season, and then the Jersey-based system. The protein and fat levels for the milk, these values are actually survey-based, and the source of these average values for farms that typically fall under the characteristics of the four scenarios as described in the user's manual. This shows the calculation of the energy-corrected milk, and as you can see, in scenario 1, the milk production level it's 50% higher than in scenario 4, it's a large difference, but it's actually that's probably fairly reflective of your upper third or upper quarter of conventional confinement-based operations with Holsteins compared to a grass-based Jersey farm. But on the basis of energy-corrected milk, about half of that difference goes away because of the 10-pound increase in energy-corrected milk on the Jersey farm because of the high protein and fat content, and the actual small reduction in the case of the energy-corrected milk on Holsteins under scenario 1. The average number of lactations, a very key variable in explaining the differences in the environmental performance of a high-production conventional farm compared to an organic farm, where a much greater premium is placed on cow health and longevity, and the cows just simply aren't pushed as hard to milk at or close to their physiological potential, and as a result they breed back more normally, they have more lactations, and they live longer. The age of the cows, average age of the cows at the end of their life, 4.4 years in scenario 1, and up to 6.4 years in the Jersey-based or organic farm. Average length of lactations, obviously, approaching a very normal 305-day lactation with a 60-day dry period on the Jersey farms. The estimates of the calving intervals are completely driven by the length of lactation, since the calving interval is simply the length of lactation plus the dry-off period, which really doesn't change much across the scenarios. One of the key parameters that drives many of the differences between the scenarios is the average number of breeding attempts per conception carried to term, and this is probably an underestimate of high production conventional farms today, and these values that we established, drawing on the experience of all of the folks that worked on developing this. Again, I think they're fairly conservative, and in that we did not want to overstate the health or the performance on the organic farm options. Now, some of the key variables that drive the differences in reproductive performance, these are the values that are in this current application. Embryonic loss rate of 20% in scenario 1, 12% in scenario 3, and 8% in scenario 4. An embryonic loss is defined as a successful conception that is terminated within 40 days of the breeding attempt. Spontaneous abortions occur from day 41 of a cow's pregnancy to 250 or 260, at which point a calf will be born either dead or alive, but a calf was carried to term and born, which would trigger the start of a lactation. This number simply, the total loss consumption is just the sum of the embryonic loss rate and the spontaneous abortion rate. And this is the number that drives how many cows that were bred and conceived lost their conception and had to return to the breeding pool. And again, it's a critical variable. The higher this number, the greater the number of replacements that have to be kept in the animal population. Now, the total replacement rate, which shows up in this line, of course, it's the sum of the cull rate, which includes both voluntary and involuntary culling, as well as the death and downer rate. And again, based on USDA survey data and high production farms, we feel that 46.2% is a typical replacement rate on high production farms with confinement systems, whereas 25% is a common and average rate for the lower production grass-based Jersey farms. You recall I emphasized the importance of this weighted average methane conversion factor, and here on the Scenario 1 farm, which is using mostly wet systems, very high methane conversion factor of 0.438 compared to these Jersey cows, which are spending a lot of time on pasture, substantially greater than 30% of DMI from pasture over the production season. And because of that, really the only manure in this scenario that's being managed in a wet system is the manure that's picked up in and around the milking parlor when the animals are in the milking process. But these are the parameters that do vary quite a bit between a high production conventional farm and or organic farms, and in particular organic farms with either crossbreeds or Jerseys. And it's these differences in values that have an enormous impact when you calculate the environmental footprint over the life of a cow and in the average year during the life of a cow. So we've gone through the 15 operational steps, and now I'm going to summarize what the user will find in the results table. This is results table number 1. Again, these results tables all appear in the front of the calculator, but there's the total replacements on the farm, and we include the death rates for heifers and calves, so that if you need 46.6% of heifers ready to breed and be moved into the milking herd, then you actually need 52.8% being born to take into account the death losses between the birth of a heifer calf, raising that calf through the first year, and then through the second year until she's bred. So all of those critical death rates are embedded in the calculator, and hence reflected in the total number of heifer calves that have to be born to sustain that one lactating cow over a year. These are the key parameters on the cow's productive life, how many years she lives, the number of lactations, and the length of the lactations. Then the milk production, and again, it's expressed in pounds and in kilograms, and it's expressed in unadjusted milk, energy-corrected milk, and then all the rest are expressed just on the basis of energy-corrected milk, since it's widely agreed in the dairy science literature that that's the preferred way to do it. So then we have per lactation, per lifetime, and per year of life. And it's really, if you really want to compare the environmental footprint of dairy farms, you need to look at most of these performance parameters per year of life. This simply captures the total calf production during the cow's productive life. Farther down into the results table, we capture the total revenue from milk sales, the total revenue from sales of calves, either post-weaning to be raised for either veal or heifer replacements, or raised for meat. And again, we express the total gross revenue on the lifetime basis and per year of life. And not a huge surprise. The revenue over a lifetime for a Jersey cow on an organic farm is just under $20,000. It's about twice what the lifetime revenue is for the Holstein cow, despite the fact that the Holstein cow is producing more milk per day during her productive life. And on the basis of per year of life, the gross income is a bit closer, given the fact that this cow is living quite a bit longer. The results table 3 gets into the estimates of manure production and nutrient excretions during the cow's life. Again, all the parameters are expressed in terms of pounds and kilograms, and then per kilogram of unadjusted milk and ECM milk, and per day, per lactation, per lifetime, and per year of life. Results table 4 summarizes the greenhouse gas estimates, the enteric methane in this set of lines, manure methane here, and then the total methane, and again expressed in all of these different ways. And by studying some of the, studying these values, it quickly becomes very apparent how significant the boundary conditions and assumptions you make about how to report these values. When you look at, for example, the enteric methane per kilogram of unadjusted milk, these values don't vary too much across the scenarios, but when you start looking at differences over the animal's life, they can become quite different. Based on our work with the calculator and the findings of this first application, these are the critical drivers that are going to have a big impact when you compare the environmental performance of a conventional versus organic, or two conventional or alternative organic systems. The milk production level per day is a critical variable. It drives many of the animal health reproduction parameters, which in turn drive the replacement rates and other key measures within the overall estimate of environmental footprints. But the replacement rate, which is really the sum of many performance parameters, including the cull rate, the death and downer rate, as well as the outcome of successful conceptions. The higher the embryonic loss or spontaneous abortion rate, the longer the average lactation, the fewer lactations, and the higher typically the replacement rate's going to need to be. Whenever you're comparing conventional and organic dairy systems, it's going to be very important to base all the comparisons on energy-corrected milk, because about 96% of the conventional milking herd are Holsteins. And there isn't that huge of a difference between the fat and protein content of purebred Holsteins on conventional farms versus organic farms. But Holsteins make up approximately half only the milking herd among organic cows, and the other half is made up of Jerseys, would be the second most common breed, and then there's quite a range of mixed breeds or crossbreeds on organic farms, and I think the evidence suggests that the percentage of Holsteins among the overall organic herd are going down because of the increasingly high cost of grain-based systems on all dairy farms, not just organic. The degree of reliance on pasture and forage-based feeds has a very significant impact in a number of different areas. The manure management systems have a very big impact, particularly on methane, as I've highlighted before. And then animal breed and genetics has also very important impacts. One of the things that we've learned in building this model and trying to understand how Dr. Capper and her team reached the conclusions that they did compared to what we've learned from building and applying this calculator are highlighted in the next few slides. Sources of bias in comparing farm systems. If you focus on 1 year in the life of a cow or one lactation in the life of a cow rather than her whole life, you're biasing the results in actually a quite significant way if the purpose of the analysis is to compare the performance between conventional and organic farms. By focusing just on that 1 year in the life of a lactating cow, you fail to take into account all the feed inputs and the waste generated by that cow up through approximately 24 months or 25 months of age when the first calf is born. You also fail to credit dairy farming systems that result in improved cow health and longevity, more normal reproduction, and hence a longer life of the cow. Because again, that initial investment of feed and waste generated in the first 2 years of the cow's life, are in effect amortized over a longer period of time, and hence contribute less significantly to the overall total life environmental impact of that animal on farms that put greater emphasis on cow health and longevity. When expressing feed intake, land use, waste excretions per unit of unadjusted milk, again, that fails to take into account the sometimes substantial differences in milk nutritional quality. And so, again, comparing a TMR-based, grain-based Holstein on confinement with relatively low milk quality in terms of protein and fat content to any other system, whether it's conventional or organic, with a higher reliance on forage-based feeds and pasture, expressing all of the intakes and waste excretions per unit of unadjusted milk biases the analysis in favor of the conventional system with the Holstein cows and against the system that puts the greater emphasis on animal health. We also feel that in light of recent science that shows compelling human health benefits from altering the fatty acid profile of organic milk to increase the omega-3 levels, reductions in the omega-6 levels, increases in CLA levels. These are milk nutritional parameters just as important and perhaps even more important than milk protein and milk fat levels. And I think the day is going to come, it may be 10 years down the road, but the day will come when there's a further correction to unadjusted milk based on these differences in fatty acid profiles. If in an analysis, if you ignore differences in culling rates and death and downer rates, as well as these the differences that exist in reproductive performance and related problems, it's really biased against the farms that are promoting good health and maintain good body condition in the animals, and hence bring about much more normal reproductive patterns, shorter lactations and more lactations. So again, if you just assume that there's no significant difference between conventional farms and organic farms in terms of these parameters, that is going to bias the results quite substantially in favor of the conventional farms, largely because of this huge difference in replacement rates between the high production, confinement, TMR-based conventional farms that frankly are burning out cows after 1, 2, and rarely more than 3 lactations. I ran across some information on a traditional Pennsylvania dairy farm to get at this profound change that's happened in cow health and longevity. This Patsy, a Holstein cow, was purchased in 1946, and this woman that's actually the grandma of a friend of mine, they came across these records when his grandmother passed away in 2004, but had kept some records from the farm. And Patsy, these are the very accurate records of the date of birth of her first 12 calves, and she was sold in December 16th, 1957, with a calf on her for dairy use. And this was not uncommon, only 50 or 60 years ago for Holstein cows to produce through 10 or more lactations. In this record book that this woman had maintained over about a 20-year period, there was about an average of 8 lactations per cow. It's very important in doing these comparisons to take into account the energy used by cows walking out to pasture, foraging on pasture, and then walking back in. It's not a huge issue on conventional farms where there's essentially no pasture, but it certainly is on organic farms. And when we're modeling our organic systems, we need to take that into account to not bias our results. And then it's always hard to include all of the inputs that are used, and in particular some of the organic practices and inputs that are critical in maintaining crop production levels and animal health. And there aren't any models that cover everything in a full and rigorous way. And then whenever you're doing these sorts of analyses, if you have excessively narrow boundary conditions, and they could be in animal health parameters or production income or soil and water quality or whatever, you can fool yourself about the overall impact of the farm. And we were amazed as we went through this analysis to see the substantial difference in meat production between these systems, and just highlight that as one of the performance parameters that does need to be taken into account when comparing a conventional and an organic system. Now, our model does not yet take into account the carbon sequestered in pasture land, which again would be an important variable to take into account to truly account for the greenhouse gas impacts. So just to summarize the sources of bias, in the original CAPR study that came out in PNAS in the summer of 2008, there's 5 of these sources of bias that are embedded in those results. We, in our model, we've not eliminated all of them, but we have corrected the analysis for 3 of them, and really these, where there's still sources of bias is a good indication of where we need to do more work. There are a number of really complex challenges to push the accuracy of our model or anyone's model to the next level. Feed quality matters greatly, both in the grain and supplement feeds and pasture and forages. And also, it's often not what is fed, but the balance of nutrients in a ration that impacts the cow health. And nobody really knows how to take those factors into consideration in doing this sort of modeling. We definitely need better data and better ways to estimate the portion of manure that's managed in different ways, and to customize those methane conversion factors for an individual farm's manure management system. And it's very complicated sorting out when a cow conceives but loses the calf, or the cow didn't conceive, maybe you missed a heat cycle. So a lot of the details of what's going on in the reproductive process with these rates is difficult to establish with a high level of accuracy, but very important to keep pushing that envelope because it's understanding what's going on in that reproductive program that is going to set the stage for both research and improvement in dairy management systems to do a better job in managing the reproductive process. We're working right now, and we're actively seeking partners to, we want to make the model more farmer-friendly. We have some good ideas about how to do that. We know we need to add additional feedstuffs and manure management options into the current steps. And we want to complete modules on CO2 and nitrous so we can calculate global warming potential. We've developed and are ready to put an animal drug use module in, which is really pretty interesting. We know we need to work on soil carbon sequestration and then acidification and eutrophication. And in terms of new applications of the Shades of Green calculator in its current form and in future versions as they come out, we're very eager to carry out some surveys of actual organic dairy farmers. I've gotten agreement from several producers that they're eager to try the model out on their farm with data specific to their farm. We know we need to develop a series of regional baselines for different breeds of cattle, for conventional and organic, to make it much easier for a dairy farmer in Nebraska or Pennsylvania or Washington State to go and choose a already fully parameterized application that comes relatively close to their farm in terms of the breed, the type of feeding systems, the type of manure management system, so that that farmer can go in and change maybe 10 to 12 parameters to make a given application track very closely to the conditions on their farm. And we obviously need to apply the calculator to many different alternative systems to start to coax out of the system the most cost-effective ways to lighten the environmental footprint. And we're looking for partners in crime to push this along, and if anyone that is listening today is interested, that's my email address, and I thank you very much for taking the time to learn about Shades of Green.
And thank you very much, Chuck. So before we move to our question and answer period, we do have a few minutes for Q&A. We'd like to ask you to complete a very quick poll. So each question will pop up on your screen for about 20 seconds, and you see the first one: did this webinar provide you with new information and or resources? So if you can go ahead and just select one of those responses, that would be great, and we can move on to the next one very shortly. Okay. All righty, and maybe we can move on to the, thank you. And then the next one's popping up. Here we go. Will you try the Shades of Green calculator on your farm or in your work with farmers? If you could just respond quickly, and then we can, we have about 10 minutes for question and answers. Okay, so just to remind you how to do Q&A. To pose a question, you'll find the question box on the right-hand side of your screen. You'll just type in your questions and hit return. If for some reason that question box is closed, you'll see you can click the little plus sign that's right next to the word question to open it up. And basically how this will work is I'll be reading the questions out loud to Chuck, and he will answer as many as we have time for. And then if after the webinar you have additional questions, you can use our online Ask an Expert system at extension.org/ask. Okay, so we have plenty of questions in the queue right now, but please do type in your questions. So, Chuck, the first question that had come in is, has this model been ground truthed with real farms? You had sort of mentioned that you're looking for farmers, but can you just respond to that?
No, it hasn't, and we're very much looking forward to that process. We've identified some farmers in a couple different regions of the country that are willing to do it, and really any farmer can actually try it themselves. The model itself is freely available on our website, and you know, if someone will take the time to read through the user's manual, it should be possible for people to give it a test run.
Mm-hmm. And did you do some validity testing, though, with that group of folks that you were working with?
Well, we haven't. What we tried to do in this first application is to characterize 4 representative farms that are generally similar to significant portions of the conventional farms in the country and the organic farms. And because we're really looking at sort of national averages within these representative farms, we know that for example, the feed rations don't really accurately reflect any individual region of the country. So we know that there's a lot of ground truthing that needs to be done. Now, in terms of some of the basic estimates that come out of the model, we ground truth them in a couple of ways. For many of the parameters that the model projects that Dr. Capper and her team did in the PNES story, article, we've replicated their results and often come within less than 1% difference. So very, very similar. And we also, many of the projections are closely aligned with the estimates that EPA reports in their most recent greenhouse gas inventory. And of course, it's not at all surprising, since in most instances where we had a choice, we adopted the EPA method or calculation for making these waste excretion methane estimates.
Okay, great. And just so folks know, if you open up your chat box, I've just entered in the website for the Shades of Green, and one of our participants has asked for Chuck's email, so I'm just going to pop that in as well, sending it off here. So you'll have both his email and the website address, okay? Let's see. Oh, and good, you're backing that up. One person asked, Chuck, are you familiar with the modeling work of Al Rotz at ARS regarding animal production? Looks like he's done some work in this area.
I believe I am. I can't think of the exact name of the models, and there's certainly a lot out there that we've used. But I think there are important opportunities for us to integrate Shades of Green with some other more sophisticated physiologically based models out there, and that's one of these areas of future development and applications that we at the center are eager to pursue with people. And because in a simple model like this, you can't get at nearly the level of sophistication that we all would like to see, but it's hard to accommodate it in a single model.
Have you done sensitivity analysis on the variations that result from different enteric estimation methods, and does it make a big difference?
Yes, we've done some of that. The different methods, some of them do vary quite a bit. Some of the methods really were developed and are most accurately applied to dairy animals that are on grain-based diets and TMRs, whereas other methods really were developed at a time or to apply to dairy animals that have a significant portion of forages in the diet. So there's certainly significant differences in some of these methods, and that's why we built in the opportunity for users to pick the method that they feel will produce the most accurate results for the actual farm or the types of farm that they're modeling in a given application.
Great. And is there an expected timeline for additions to the modules that you outlined?
We hope to put out the next version of the calculator by mid-year. We hope to have at least a few of the add-on modules in. We'll certainly have the drug use module in. And we'd very much like to be able to post at that time the first set of regional applications, which it could be to an individual grass-based organic Jersey farm, or it could be we might find someone at Oregon State that's worked with several of the Jersey farms and do sort of a composite drawing on a half dozen Jersey farms in a state. And we're looking for people that are willing to go through that process either on their own or with us. But on the Organic Center website, we will strive to post the results of as many different applications as possible so that a year or two down the road, an individual user can find a already completed application that's relatively close to their conditions. Because if we can do that, someone can go in and test the response of the system to a specific change, say a change in rations or a change in breed, with really very little work and time.
Excellent. So do you have thoughts about the recent release of the National Air Emissions Monitoring data?
I don't know enough about it.
Okay.
In fact, if someone is listening in and could send me an email to and suggest how I could learn more about that and how we might draw upon it, that would be obviously a valuable way to validate certainly the methane estimates that we've currently embedded in the model. Okay, and I have one question here that says, I assume manure and nutrient excretions are based on parameters. Do the parameters relate to organic and or grass-based systems? Only to the extent that some of the equations used to estimate the excretions, some have really been developed and have the smallest standard deviations, for example, when applied to either a grain-based system or a forage-based system. Now, all of the nutrient intakes and nutrient excretions reflect the level of milk production, the total dry matter intake needed per day to support the cow, as well as the mix of feedstuffs that go into meeting the nutritional needs of the cow. So in that respect, all of the subsequent estimates reflect the differences in the feeds required to support the cow, as well as the mix of feedstuffs that go into the ration. Okay. I'm just parsing through here. There's a question here about comparison of Jerseys to Holsteins, and maybe asking about other breeds like Swiss. Is there any consideration about alternative breeds besides? The model contains now Holsteins, Jerseys, and crossbreds as three options. This is another area where we'd love to be able to expand the range of breeds that are embedded in the model, and I think that this is going to become increasingly important, because I think it's very clear that the dairy industry as a whole, not just the organic component of the dairy industry, I think we're going to be moving back towards more forage-based feeds and backing off some of the grain, and that's going to have a significant impact on a lot of performance parameters. Okay, great. Actually, I'm seeing on my clock that we're now out of time, but I'd like to thank you all for your questions. As I mentioned before, this webinar is part of an ongoing series at eOrganic, so you can find an archive of today's session
recordings of our other webinars, as well as articles, videos, and more at eextension.org/organic_production. Just want to note that the URL that you registered on will have Dr. Benbrook's slides, a PDF of all of his slides that he presented today, a link to the Shades of Green calculator, and his email address. So if you find that you're looking for that, take a look back there. And Dr. Benbrook, thank you so much for joining us, and thank you all for coming.
My pleasure, and thanks to everyone who listened.